Now, I have not heard this before today, but there is a shock claim that JFK was murdered by the CIA days after demanding UFO files from a NASA visit.
Oh.
Now, is that why? The CIA? Because, I mean, the CIA did it with the help of LBJ. Am I right? Who's that?
LBJ sitting over MLK's shoulder.
So yeah, JFK was the 30th anniversary was on Wednesday. So the
60th.
What?
Double it.
What did I say? 30?
30.
Yeah, he was. No, you guys are wrong. He lived another 30 years. It's like Elvis. 60th anniversary. And I don't know the veracity of this. Did he claim, did he demand UFO files in a NASA visit? I don't know. Maybe. I'm sure they all do. Isn't that the first thing you would do if you became president? Is be like, yeah, tell me about the aliens, you fucking idiots. I don't care about anything else.
Definitely be in the top 5 things, but yes.
What would be the first thing if not aliens?
I mean, it would be like aliens, JFK, Bigfoot. Like I'd want to clear up all the big conspiracy theories first. So it would be up there. I just don't know in which order.
I mean, it would be.
I want to know what's at Area 51. That's number 4.
Aliens. That's aliens. Everything that you said is aliens. Maybe Bigfoot, but that's probably an alien too.
Fair. It all goes back to aliens.
It's all aliens. So JFK was assassinated, wink, wink, 60 years ago in a couple days as of today. Michael, what is your theory? What happened?
So I don't...
Back into the left? Was there...
So I actually don't have a conclusion on who was behind it because I don't think that there's evidence. There's a lot of theories. People say he was killed because he wanted to pull out of Vietnam. People say that he was killed because
he wanted to pull out of your mom. What?
No, he definitely didn't want to pull out, but he wanted to pull out of Vietnam. Not my mom. My mom would have been
keep going.
One at the time. What was I saying?
Yeah, okay, you said Vietnam was one of the reasons.
There's all sorts of theories about why he was killed. He wanted to pull out of Vietnam. He wanted to end the Federal Reserve. He wanted to disclose aliens, like whatever. I don't really know. What I can say with a lot of confidence is the story that they told us in the Warren Commission is not true. That there was one shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, shooting from the 6th story of the school book depository, killing the president. That is the official story. Although in the 1970s they had a whole commission on this, and then again in the 90s after the movie JFK, and the conclusions of those were there was a conspiracy and likely a second shooter. So I'm at the point where I told Charles this. I'm going to back up. I told Charles this. This was my red pill moment. I was like a Bush Republican, like go kill the terrorists, like not thinking. And then I watched a documentary on the frickin' JFK assassination and was just like, there's like one piece of evidence. I can give you one piece of evidence that disproves the whole story.
Go for it.
The 2 doctors that operated on Kennedy at Parkland. He comes in, he's dead. They're operating on him, trying to revive him. If
he comes in dead, what are they doing operating on him?
Well, they
He's
tried
the president. They have to do everything.
They tried to revive him, but he comes in. The 2 doctors, there's 2 of them. They both describe and draw his head wounds. They draw I forget what it's called, the occipital cortex, an exit wound 5 by 5 inches in the back of his head. Okay. This is what the doctors, they draw them. We have drawings of them. The autopsy photos, which are released later, show a tiny entrance wound in the back of his head. So there's only 2 conclusions. One, the doctors are misremembering the wound, both of them, and drawing it incorrectly, or the photos were doctored. I think it's more likely the photos were doctored. And if the photos were doctored, that means people in the government doctored them. We have a conspiracy to kill the president and then to cover up the truth.
Well, and to your point about the wounds, I mean, there's so much other information that was. I know there was a conversation about the way that they described the brain matter, or what was left of his brain and what it looked like, and then after the final reports came out, it was a completely different description of it. There were apparently slides that were kind of dissections of the brain that were taking to look under microscopes that went missing. There's all this other stuff. And for people who, because I think there's a lot of people who don't believe that, whichever side you fall on this, there are people who don't believe it could possibly happen. But like, there are like a lot of cover up. Like this is a thing that we do as a nation. Like we like often cover things up. We, between the 30s and the 70s, we had the Tuskegee experiment where we, said we were treating 400 people for syphilis and we were not. We had their cover up surrounding Vietnam and getting us into that war. Operation Northwoods to try to get us into the Cuban, to get to war with Cuba. So we do these things very often. And so it's not outside of the realm of possibility that this could be a thing. And based on a lot of the information not lining up, I mean, it certainly sounds questionable. And I'm going to play a clip that we have from Fox News and MSNBC because they both talked about this issue.
Before you play that clip, Charles, weren't you just saying with the aliens that it would take, like, there's, this wide network conspiracy of like everyone hiding this. And so like, that's a reason not to believe it.
Right.
But then you list all of these conspiracies where they did.
Well, here's the thing. I was playing devil's advocate because I definitely believe in aliens. But two, the reason that I think it's a little harder to hold that conspiracy is because now you're bringing in many nations, all of which have competing interests. And so you have to get them all on the same page. I think for the American government, it's easy to get those folks on the same page because of one reason or another. But
Santa Claus, that's a conspiracy held by...
You're going to play that clip now.
People.
Oh, it should be playing. 1 second.
Empirical answer about whether or not it was a conspiracy. It was definitely a conspiracy. There's no question about that. Who actually shot? We name them in the podcast. We say the positions they were in. We have a good guess as to who they were based on all the research.
Paul Landis says he found a bullet lodged into the seat of JFK's limo after he was shot. He then grabbed it to thwart souvenir hunters. After that, Landis says he placed the bullet next to Kennedy on the president's stretcher at the hospital. Now, this would contradict the Warren Commission, which said the bullet struck the president from behind.
The Warren Commission says that there were only 3 bullets fired from the 6th floor. This creates an extra bullet, and it strongly indicates that there is a second assassin.
Even RFK Jr. was on our couch where talking about his uncle's assassination. He's got huge questions.
Even RFK Jr. has questions.
Oh, yeah, he does, for sure. I mean, that whole family is like, I'm surprised he hasn't been assassinated yet.
Wow. God forbid something happens. This podcast is going to get put into some evidence or something like that.
I didn't say that I want him to.
No, I know. I'm kidding.
Conspiracy of, hidden, backroom individuals talking about killing RFK Jr. I'm not a part of that. Gosh darn.
Just in case the CIA is listening. None of us are.
Well, this guy.
I love RFK.
Yeah, I know. I'm not. We don't want harm to come to anybody. So Rob Reiner, I find it's interesting that Rob Reiner, isn't he like a major like Trump derangement syndrome, like total nut job, right?
Yeah.
And he just like all the lies, love or hate Trump. I don't care. I'm not like a giant fan, but I also don't believe all the bullshit that's been said about him. And Rob Reiner just takes this. And he's not the only example, but he takes all of that the government says and that the media says, and he just runs with it, and all of it's true, right? That's what he does. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. But he thinks that the government killed JFK, right? So how can you hold those two thoughts in your head at the same time? How can you hold the thought that, yeah, the government is totally in on this? They killed a fucking president. And I'm going to start a whole podcast about it. I'm going to name names, all of it. Oh, but when they also tell me that all the other bullshit, I'm going to believe that. I'm just going to swallow it. How is that possible?
I don't know.
selective, but I mean, I think you're just choosing to ignore other things and acknowledge other. I mean, at that point, it's personal interest, I think. Yeah, because how can you believe? I mean, it's like the same thing with a lot of like black people today who distrust government. Why do you distrust government? Because look at the things government has done. But then you also have many black people today who, as part of the Democratic Party, are very supportive of expansion of government, and they ignore the things of the past because of today. So I think it's just kind of selective what you choose to believe and acknowledge and what you choose not to believe.
I mean, you could call it a first principle if you will, but the best thing to do is just to always assume the government is lying to you.
Yes.
Always. 100%.
I do that.
If you, I forget the phenomenon or whatever, but like when you're reading the newspaper and you come across an article where you actually have some expertise in the subject matter, like you can spot all the lies and everything that's in there. And you say, well, that's not quite true. And, whatever. And then you go on to the next article that's about something that you don't have any expertise in. And you just believe it, hook, line, and sinker. When you should just assume that start from the principle that everything is wrong and they're probably lying.
That's fair. I mean,
is that not a great way to live?
Oh, that's how I live. But I would assume Rob Reiner is trying to make money and get attention. Like,
make money.
But also I would think that's 70-something% of Americans probably believe JFK was killed as part of it. We're like not in the minority here. The whole story has fallen apart over the decades, that the story they told us. So I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, the level of cognitive dissonance that exists within individuals in the political sphere is shocking at times.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting about this, and I only found this out in preparation for this conversation, is that his brain is missing. Like, and it's been missing, and we don't talk about that enough. Like a president's brain, a president who's been assassinated, whose brain should be in the National Archives or somewhere stored, is missing, and like we're just okay with that. Like, it's kind of crazy. And it's really nuts to me. And so I don't think they've given a legitimate explanation as to why. One of the things I did read said that in the course of moving it around, they put it in kind of this liquid to preserve it, put it in a container, put it in a larger box with some of the other things from that day. His personal
houses?
Huh?
They're moving houses?
They, for whatever reason, and what I read, the personal secretary was giving it to the family, and then the family was going to give it back to the National Archives. And when they returned it to the National Archives, the one thing missing was the brain. And I don't know, and the slides that they dissected to look at the brain too. And also the other thing that
hold on, I can tell you where the brain is.
Where?
On the fucking highway.
They weren't on a highway.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, it was on a road.
Yeah, I mean, well, the brain.
That was some sort of like a bridge too far. Don't say that.
His brain was actually all over his wife, Jackie Kennedy. She describes in the interviews afterwards that his brain was like on her. And
she picked. I think she also picked pieces up too, right? Yeah. And her dress is also not in the archives. They have that privately stored, and I think the family, there's some sort of agreement where the family says it can't be taken out of storage for like 100 years or something like that. It's there's a lot of weird stuff surrounding this.
Yeah, well, theoretically, the brain would show the path of a bullet, so that might be part of the reason it's missing. It's the Warren Commission excluded a lot of evidence. I mean, I don't know how many witnesses that said there was a shooter on the grassy knoll that were not included in the Warren Commission's report. They were not interviewed. They submitted their, testimony to the Warren Commission, but the Warren Commission never followed up with them. There's 10s, 20s, 30 of these people who said, no, for sure. One guy says he's there with these families, he's got kids, and he said the bullet whizzed over his head. He drops to the ground, and he's standing on the grassy knoll. He drops to the ground. And when he's talking about this, because he's in a documentary, he's like, I swear, like, I will go to my grave. The bullet went over my head.
Wow.
I dropped to the ground. But like, the Warren Commission doesn't include that. Like, there was already a story that they wanted to portray to the world about the assassination. They went to prove that story rather than actually looking at the evidence and seeing where it took them. So then you ask, okay, well, why did they do that?
Well, I mean, devil's advocate, because I do believe it, but we do know that with a lot of legal proceedings, they will often exclude some testimony from people who were there because they feel as though, the excitement of it all and all that stuff may cloud their recollection of events. So maybe they chose to exclude that.
Yeah.
But if a bullet whizzes past your head, I mean, I think that's kind of, it's something that you either know or you don't know. Like, I don't think that's really like the direction someone ran or what they might've been wearing. That's a different story. But if a bullet flies past your head, I think you're pretty sure of that.
Yeah, well, I get that argument, but then in the face of their magic bullet theory, you know why they had to come up with the magic bullet theory, right? Because they said for sure 3 shots. That's it. Only 3 shots. And then later in the investigation, they found a bullet that had missed, that would have been shot from behind, that missed the motorcade and hit a curb of the street. And they like cut it out and they took the bullet out and they're like, oh shit, here's another bullet. How do we explain all the shots and keep the 3-shot theory? Well, that's how they created the magic bullet theory, because one bullet now had to do all that damage, which was go into Kennedy's back, coming down into his back, like back here, come out his neck, hit Connolly in the back by the armpit, come out, hit Connolly in the wrist, and then lodge in his left thigh. And then the bullet, if you look at it, it's pristine. The one they found on the stretcher that guy put there, that's what they said. They find the bullet at Parkland on the stretcher. They just find it laying there. It looks like it hasn't even been shot.
Would you say that it was as pristine as perhaps a Middle Eastern passport? Oh, don't tell me you don't know about finding passports in the trouble.
Oh, that's where we're going with this.
Yes.
Come on.
As pristine as that. Yes.
Okay, so my question
doesn't melt steel beams, nor does it melt passports.
It melts black boxes, or what are they called? The black box?
Black box, yeah.
Yeah, black box.
And it takes down buildings, but it does not burn and melt passports. Correct. That is true.
We don't know what the impacts of a large commercial airliner hitting a building are. So it's not something you can just test. So maybe passports do whatever. I have a question.
What?
Who
No.
has the most to gain, or had the most to gain? And I mean, who was behind it? Like, I don't think we ever talked about that. I personally think there's allegations that the CIA, the FBI, LBJ, the mob, like this, that, the other. So who was behind it and who had the most to gain?
I actually just learned about the mob theory just the other day.
Well, that's because I'm from New Jersey. That's probably why I knew.
What is it? Okay. Is
The
it
mob's a big thing there.
Are they?
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
they're the Sopranos. Is that where they're from?
Well,
Aren't they? I don't know. I've never seen.
No, they are. Yeah, the Sopranos, they are from there. Yes.
So yeah, I guess the mafia helped get him elected somehow. I don't know the full story there, but then he turned around and started to crack down on him. And they, you don't mess with the mob. I think that's how that goes. That's the old saying: "Don't mess with the mob." Isn't that what they said?
Yeah.
I think it's a confluence of interest. I think you have the mob involved. I mean, Jack Ruby, who killed Oswald, Jack Ruby's involved. You have the CIA, and you have Johnson, who wants to be president. I think it's some confluence of interests there that come together to assassinate the president, make LBJ president, go to war in Vietnam, and then do whatever corrupt stuff the mob wants to do. That makes the most sense to me. And there's a couple other pieces of evidence that support that. One, this is not the first political opponent of Lyndon Johnson that has got shot in the head. It's the second. And then further, if you listen to Jack Ruby's only televised interview on this, he says, and I'm pretty much quoting, after he kills Oswald, he says, "I can't tell you the full truth, but if you knew the people that were involved, it's the people with the most amount of power in the world." That's what he says.
Who has the most amount of power?
I don't know. It's a very cagey comment, but he dies in prison some years later, and the story dies with him. But he says it's the most powerful people in the world that were behind it, the conspiracy to kill the president.
Have y'all seen any videos where that allege that Jackie Kennedy Onassis is the one that shot him?
That shot him?
Mm-hmm. I've seen the theory that
Like
the driver
actually shot him.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I know. I
She had a handgun and the video. I mean, I don't believe this, but it's an interesting video to watch because it kind of does look like there's something in her hand and she's like he's kind of there, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden he goes back. So
there is the theory that it's the driver. And if you watch the video, it's so grainy. It kind of looks like he turns around and goes like this, but I think it was Oswald shooting possibly, and then at least one other guy on the grassy knoll behind the fence.
You think Lee Harvey Oswald did it?
He could have been involved. Yeah, sure. Somebody was shooting from the school book depository. There's one woman who testifies to the Warren Commission, and they ignore her testimony too, that says she saw Oswald eating lunch on the second floor during the shooting. So some people who want to exonerate him point to that as evidence that he didn't shoot. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he was some sort of agent of the CIA, and he could have been shooting. Sure.
I saw something where it was looking at, I guess it was, so after he died, I guess Jackie flew back and they swore in LBJ on the plane or something like that. And there's this part where she's like, they killed him. And LBJ turns to his advisor and like winks. And like, I don't know if, like, I feel like if you did that, like that is like why give it up all, like at that point, you know, every camera's on you, you know, the whole world's watching you. Like, do you really just have to wink in that moment? Like, if that's the case, like, do you really have to? So I don't know.
I'd probably wink. I'd probably do that.
Can't wait till later.
I just, you know, some of the things, like just using this podcast as an example, like I think I would probably be the guy that's like, yeah, yep.
Yeah, that's in line with, there's testimony from the coroner who they've had at Parkland Hospital that as they're putting Kennedy's body into the box to send it to, they sent it to Bethesda, I think, in Maryland. She's over the box and she's saying, quote, "They've killed my husband. They've killed my husband." The coroner describes it as the saddest thing he's ever seen in his life. But if she's saying both on the plane and over the box, "They've killed my husband," who is she? She's certainly not implying Lee Harvey Oswald as they.
Right? I mean, and I think there was probably threats that came before that. I think they were aware that there was some sort of concerted effort, whether, I don't know if he believed it was, you know, his vice president, but there was some sort of concerted effort to go after his life. And so, I mean, listen, if she thought he did it though, why are you standing next to him in the plane, like saving face? Like at that point, I'd be in front of the news being like, it was him. Don't swear him in. I don't know.
Yeah, why wouldn't she do that? That's a good question, actually. I mean, maybe is it enough that, well, you're going to die too now if you do that, right? Or maybe I don't know.
I mean, maybe they got young kids. Like maybe
she was MK Ultra'd.
Yet another conspiracy theory that's true that they covered up.